Emergency podcast. Betty did a thing, so we gotta talk about it. Emergency podcast. It's an emergency. Emergency podcast. Shut up, hell yeah, shut up, hell yeah, shut up. Emergency podcast. It's an emergency.
Hey, a hearty hello to you all, and welcome to Emergency Podcast, the Austin FC podcast where we talk about all the Austin FC emergencies. And you know, when we don't have a cold open, that it is a real emergency. You have heard by now. Everybody in the Austin FC universe, I believe, has heard by now. This morning, about 10:15-ish, we got the news that not only was Nico Estévez let go from Austin FC, which we were expecting, but Rodolfo Borrell, the sporting director, also let go, which surprised many of us, but maybe not all of us. Moisés, let's get into, first of all, just, I guess, kind of initial gut reactions. I mean, I should maybe go first.
Yeah,
but
you take the lead. I've got a couple things that I think will surprise you.
Okay. Well, I was in a day job work meeting, so as I always am at Monday at 10 a.m. So then my phone buzzes and it's the group text that we have with some of the Austin FC media, and we're talking about both Nico and Rodo fired, and I'm like, wait, what? And weirdly, I check my email. Somehow the Wi-Fi at my work has decided it did not want to let this email get to me, so much so that anything after 10:10 a.m. in my Gmail account was just not coming to my phone. So finally, though, figured it out. Obviously couldn't engage because I was in the middle of a work meeting, but processed afterwards. And certainly, Moisés, thanks for jumping in and writing the article that I couldn't be in at my day
pleasure.
job. But certainly, it's two guys get fired. I've had relationships with both of them in terms of journalist to team leader. And again, I always describe Nico as unfailingly nice and definitely very thoughtful. And I'm going to miss his presence at the press conferences because I found him engaging, sometimes a little long-winded sometimes, but mostly just great, personable. And I wish him well. I don't know what his future holds necessarily in terms of like head coaching jobs or assistant coaching jobs, but obviously I do hope that he stays in soccer. Rodolfo Borrell, it was kind of a weird hire at the outset. I mean, he had never been a sporting director before. Definitely came to know and appreciate kind of his take on things, his approach, his candor with us, especially sometimes behind the scenes and all that. But again, just listening to the national pundit criticisms on Soccer-Wise today, kind of part of my reaction is, you can't say bad things about us, only we can say bad things about us. But some of the things that they were pointing out and some of the communication difficulties that apparently some agents had and things like that with him made me not necessarily reassess, but at the same time, just wondering, okay, was he really the best fit? And then just, of course, looking at the list of players that he brought in and the hit rate on those, especially your DPs, your U22s. And again, like I've said before with MLS, you have to have your DPs and your U22s hit to be successful. And if you're not doing that in MLS, then you can't really be a sporting director in MLS.
Yeah, I think there's an interesting faster than a quick take, faster than a quick reaction assessment of both of their tenures at the club to be done. And it's something that I think a lot of the popular consensus out there was very heavily, and I think I'm not talking out of turn, yourself included, but why Borrell too? But why Borrell? And
yeah, that's initially my reaction. I just thought that, again, we've heard that there's this kind of shift to the sporting director centric model.
Mm-hmm.
So clearly, if you've got that and you've got a coach that's on the way out, why would you also replace the sporting director, since that's what the club is supposed to pivot around, and you just find a better fitting, maybe quote unquote better coach to suit what the sporting director is trying to do. But you were going to say.
Yeah, to me, you're hitting on exactly what I was going to next, which is that sporting director-centric club model, which Rodo spoke to a number of us about in a variety of different settings, was very much, in the way that he presented it, it makes the club effectively impervious to a bad coach or a coach who has a bad run of form or a coach who happens to lose part of the locker room. Okay, well, the tactics and the style and the culture of the club stays the same. And in the way that he presented it, it was very much like, look, this is for the good of the club. And it sounds like a great 10-slide PowerPoint presentation. It very much sounds like this is what he sold ownership and management on. And it does sound like a good pitch.
And when you come from Man City,
yeah, when you come fresh off, you come fresh off of winning the treble, that helps sell it too. In no way am I saying that he like snowed the front office and he sold them a bag of goods. I think there was a little bit of your pal Doyle went a bit far, almost to the point of he was a total disaster. He was the worst. And I don't believe that to be the case. I think that in the case of both of these guys, may be unpopular. It may be the wonky way to go about it, but I think both of them made major contributions to the long tail history of the club that are worth reflecting on a little bit without being an apologist for either one of them in various ways. When it comes to the actual performance on the field, I admire a coach having a sampling size of 2 for Austin, unlike the previous one, who is willing to take accountability for losses on the field, who is willing to take it on the chin for his players and not throw his players under the bus. A coach who is willing to give thoughtful answers that are realistic when he would note that, look, with these injuries, these guys aren't robots. And because the coach is the one who sets himself up as being accountable by taking the job and, in his own words, being accountable, well, that's the guy that we've got to peg it on when these guys come back from injury and they're somehow immediately injured again, even though that's the responsibility of the medical and high performance department of the club, which goes to who hires the medical and high performance side of the club and ensures that the standards are where they need to be. On the way into this club, Brendan Hines-Ike told us that it was worlds of difference from what he experienced at DC United, at any other club. The indications that I've gotten on background is that it's still good, but it is not that level of vociferous, wow, this is great. And even in a couple of those press conferences, when we asked about, so this guy just came out injured and now he's back out injured again, what's going on? There was a bit of, you know, the coach going, how do I not throw my medical team under the bus, but I need to throw my medical team under the bus because I don't get it either, guys. There was that sense of exasperation that could be read on him, even though he was doing the charitable thing, he was doing the older brother thing, the dad thing of protecting his organization, which I think is a credit to him. And he did not do it at the hazard of throwing people under the bus. That's a big piece of it. There is a great deal of credit that Nico Estévez deserves for fully resetting the concept of what the relationship between the coach and the fan base should be, and the respect that the coach has for the fan base, and the willingness that the coach has to interact with the fan base, and that he willfully was ready to put himself right there at the battlements with everybody. That isn't, it's not nothing. Coming into this environment that had been very hostile to the previous coach and making a point of not just having a background in fan culture, in being on his hands and knees, painting banners and tifos and posters and so on. Not just because he had that background, but because he operationalized it in the way that he went about doing his job. I think that's commendable. I think that's something that should not get lost in what has been, there's no two ways about it, performance-wise, the bottom of the club's history is where we are right now. A string of results that, despite the recent ones that he did like to cite, the bad ones far outweigh the good bright lights that we've had over the last few games.
And there is a bit of what have you done for me lately there too. But on Saturday, I was curious on Saturday with the press conference. My Sunday article tried to encapsulate that. But if you're interested in chronicling the end, watching that whole press conference is pretty fascinating. I asked him in the first question about just this feeling like an inflection point for the season or even the franchise, which turned out to be pretty prescient, I guess. I asked then transition to what went awry in the game in that question, and he addressed some things about the question. But then I asked him about this kind of continuation of late goals let in, leading to what is now 14 drop points, which is equivalent to the number of points that Austin actually has right now. And he latched on to that part of the first question where talked about this inflection point for the franchise. And that's where he got into talking about he didn't quite say, don't blame me for the 6 years. He didn't quite say this team was bad before I got here, but he certainly looked at, again, he didn't feel it was fair that 23 and 24 were activated when the team was playing badly in 26, even though I think for a lot of fans, that was the vibes. That was what they were feeling. They were feeling this kind of hopelessness that came from having seen it before and seeing the same thing happen and seeing the club not responding in the same way that they were not responding in 23 and 24 when things were beginning to slide. But in that, he did talk about taking Austin to its first final, and you absolutely cannot take it away from him that he did that. And that's commendable. And that was an incredible run. That was a really, really great time to be an Austin FC fan. And those matches, I mean, starting with the comeback against El Paso, which, why are you in that position in the first place? And certainly did not fare well against the USL team this year, but that whole run had just so much narrative embedded in it. And it's a shame that we couldn't have won the final, obviously, but I'm gonna cherish the memories of that Open Cup and be thankful to Nico for that. But at the same time, as we'll get into with some stats in a little bit here, it's not good right now. He got a better roster in 26, and the team is performing much more poorly than they did in 25.
I do not envy at all the position he was coming into, because on the one hand, regardless of how nice of a guy he was and how great of a job he did trying to engage with the portion of the fan base that were willing to engage with him, there were plenty of people who wanted him fired from the moment he got hired. I think that one of the elements of it was he was starting from a ways downhill rather than from at sea level when it came to rolling the boulder up. And I think that there's a certain amount of you play with the cards that you're dealt, and he went out at Dallas with a sporting operation that it's amazing to me how many Austin fans seem to think that he got a totally fair shake at Dallas, despite the many, many cultural issues that a lot of Austin people have every time they go anywhere near Frisco. It is amazing to me that somebody can come out the other side of his Dallas experience as much of an optimist as he was about the possibility for a successful future, that in his first season, he got Austin to its first cup final. And people would argue, well, a better coach would have gotten them all the way through that final, lacking a time machine. I'm just talking about the cards that actually got played. And for me, the thing that I will reveal here for the first time, I haven't told you this.
Oh, okay.
In a message I got back from him yesterday morning, there was that same dedication to, we are going to pull this out and we are going to do this no matter what it takes. There was never that level of complete composure, of complete calm, which we saw in that press conference where he said, look, it is the manager's job to stay objective, to stay calm, to stay composed. There's no room for histrionics. This is paraphrasing now. But the thing that I admired the most about his tenure is that despite many setbacks, despite things that were outside of his control, despite having a sporting director who I understand on background was prone to chewing out players, taking the verbal belt to them effectively, despite all of that, the reason that I have said for so long that my impression and understanding is that locker room would run through glass for him, the vast majority of it, a couple exceptions I think are in there, is because despite that kind of environment where you had a sporting director who set up a system wherein, yes, there was a coach, but from his own lips, the coach didn't quite matter as much as the club, the sporting direction. He effectively did not want the title of head coach, because who's the first guy that people want to fire? The head coach. But he wanted the overriding control of the sporting operation, not as much as doing the job, doing the work, to some comments from Tom Bogert this morning, where he seemed to have a weird communication style for a guy who would allege that, oh, nobody wants this player, nobody wants this other player, would tell this to fans on away games.
Yeah.
And yet he's not taking calls from agents that very well might be looking to pay actual money for some of these players that he says simply nobody is interested in. Right. So for me, part of where my opinion and impression of Nico has been formed over the last just under 2 years has been looking at the things that earlier on you think, this seems like what it's like working under Rodo, and that over time, out of Rodo's own mouth, not in privileged conversations, not in situations specifically clearly delineated as off the record, but in other spaces, things that I've had brought to me, things that I have overheard in settings where he's not saying it to me directly and I'm just overhearing it. He will say some of these things that I have mentioned he has also said off the record. That's when it becomes on the record.
Right. Yeah.
When you tell Tom Bogert, you can't run that. When Tom is calling him for comment, and Tom says, "Well, Rodo, I'm calling you because I'm running it, and by the way, I don't work for you."
Right.
There's managing your relationship with the media, and there's trying to handle your way with the media. And there are things that I like about the way that Rodo changed the perspective of the club on relationships with the media, ways that things have opened up, ways that things have become a bit more trustworthy. And I don't want to endanger any of that. But I think that now we are where we are. And here's the most surprising thing that I was going to say.
Okay.
I think this is maybe the best piece of soccer business Anthony Precourt has done.
Okay.
This is a businessman saying, I am willing to say, I put my cards down, I put my chips down, I made a big bet, I laid a big bet. It paid off in some respects, but I am going to make the hard pivot and accept that those chips are gone, and we're going to push ahead and we're going to keep playing, but not from a position of doubling down and just going, we're going to increase the level of peril for potential upside.
Yeah.
And I think that as loath as I am to go, I got to give a billionaire credit. I've got to say that making this level of move is why for so long people listening to the show have heard me say, I don't see how you fire the coach unless you're also getting rid of Rodo Borrell, because to take just one of your beloved fantasy dream picks for coach, you don't sign a Wilfred Nancy to coach this team with Rodo Borrell over him.
Right.
You don't sign a Vanni Sartini. You don't sign a Jim Curtin for sure.
Yeah.
You don't sign the best options for a better coach. And it was never all along, it was never me saying Nico Estévez is the greatest coach of all time. Nobody ever put those words in my mouth because I didn't say that. But I feel that Nico Estévez was set up with a great deal of potential upside for a big risk of can he succeed in this system with, they're both from the same country, but they're not the same men, Nico and Rodo. They are not the same men at all.
Right.
What was there a potential big upside for Nico to succeed in this environment? Absolutely. And I think he really did give it every ounce that he could.
Right. And 25 was an improvement. Like 25 was movement in the right direction, but it just didn't happen in 26. And like the worst disservice Rodo did to Nico was right before hiring him, talking about names you wouldn't believe, like setting these sky high expectations for who the coach was going to be. And then people were underwhelmed. If he had said, we're going to look and evaluate who is the best fit and the best coach for this team going forward, then hires Nico, makes his case. It doesn't get measured against that names you wouldn't believe versus name that is absolutely totally plausible in MLS hires.
And that brings to mind something that I don't think I'd quite realized until now. Today has been a bit of a wild ride.
And I haven't had time to process fully, but
me either. The last year and a couple of months have been really crazy for me personally.
Sure.
And a piece of that, like, I don't think that I'm being over generous or over sympathetic or I don't think there's such a thing as over empathetic. Nico Estévez coached his first year at this team while his mother was dying in another country.
Yeah. Yeah. Which I don't think a lot of people really know or clue into.
He didn't make a big deal out of it. No, I didn't know anything about it until literally in the tunnel after that LAFC game when Austin got bounced out. Yeah. And we're done with the season, and it was, my mom's really sick, and it doesn't look good, and I'm getting on a plane tomorrow.
Right.
And that completely recontextualized for me to have that season and turn around a franchise to the extent that he did in various ways that I fully understand and fully get that it is difficult to see that from right now.
Yeah.
But hopefully the disconnection from the coach is something that gives people a little bit of space to breathe and go,
right.
I mean, take that as an estimation of him as a person. And it's something that I don't want to go unmentioned, even as valid as the results on the field absolutely are, unquestionably. He held himself to that standard. So I'm not saying don't hold him to that standard, but I think that context is something that is real easy to get lost in a Eurocentric sport where coaches get fired a lot more frequently than they usually do in MLS, and things work a little bit differently than they do in MLS. And I think that's the biggest thing to the extent that I've been able to process it so far, that I wanted to underline for folks. And the thing that came to me that I hadn't quite realized is that I ended up bookending Nico's tenure in that room. I asked the first question to Rodo that was not phrased to be antagonistic. It was, you said names we wouldn't believe. Why this name? It was very plainly, and up until that point, I think I had nothing but a completely professional, above board rapport with Rodo. And his facial reaction to it was like I'd slapped him in the face. And why I was asking it was, I could see there being some logic in the hire. I could see there being an opportunity for a coach with everything to prove and everything to show what he was really capable of with a team in transition, a team in active rebuild. And I wanted to give Rodo an opportunity. I thought a layup opportunity.
Yeah.
To go,
and he
this is why this
been
guy
expecting that question.
He should have been. And there's a difference between,
I'm sure
managing the
Cam
media.
prepared him for that question.
I'm sure that he probably did. Whether Rodo listened or not, who knows, man. That was the first crack in the armor for me, going, And there's a certain thing we try to be. I don't believe in being apolitical like Vanni Sartini, but I think that when you look at a lot of the stuff that Rodo said early on, one of the things that came up in fan chats was, he sounds like Trump. He sounds like he's bullying and assertive, and he's just going to tell you he's going to make Austin great again, and that you're going to believe it, and it's going to be great. Names you wouldn't believe. Don't worry about the GAM. I'm going to open up the GAM. We don't have any GAM. I don't know where the GAM is. What happened to the GAM? It's not my fault, the GAM. You don't understand. If only I'd known what the roster rules were like. And then 3 years before, he was saying, I know everything about the roster rules. But also, my understanding on background is that he let go members of his staff who did know the roster rules really well, fired them, called one of them the next day, insisting they needed to help him with something related to the roster rules and roster compliance. After firing them. And these are things that I didn't know 3 years ago. I didn't know a year and a half ago. I only heard, for me, a lot of the stuff that I heard from birdies started trickling out around All-Star time. And one of the great things about All-Star is everybody's in town. Everybody's got stories to tell. And it was interesting bouncing things off of people about, what do you think of Rodo? And there being a kind of look like, that guy. And that isn't to say that everybody's perception of him on the negative side is necessarily 100% accurate.
Yeah.
But where there's smoke, there's fire. And that is why I think, and find me at the beginning of the year, and I don't think I'd believe if you told me that in May of 2026, I would be saying that Anthony Precourt firing his sporting director and his coach on the same day is arguably one of the smarter and more decisive moves that he's made since Austin FC was founded.
Okay. Yeah. This is where the team is, just looking at the assortment of stats. And some of these from American Soccer Analysis, so which tends to be wonky. Some of them from FOTMob, which are more just looking at what they're doing on the field, more pure numbers. Anyway, their X points right now, so the amount of points that you would expect them to have based on various kind of performances.
Wait, hold on. Before the X points, what are the A points? The actual points, and then X points. 14,
and the X points are 16.59, which is 26th in MLS. Okay. So they're actually underperforming their X points right now, and I think a lot of that probably has to do with those late game giveaways, right? So goals added differential, and again, goals added is weird, but I think looking at them season long over this aggregate, I think if you look at individual players by themselves, if for single games, they're kind of weird. So goals added differential is negative 14.12. That's 29th in MLS. They're rolling NPXGD, which is a graphic that they do on their visualization site. Looks like a big red mountain range, and that's bad. Big chances, 21, that's 29th in MLS. Big chances missed, that's 12, that's also 29th in MLS. Touches in the opposition box, 269, that's 26th in MLS. Going down to defense, expected goals against 30.4, that's 29th in MLS. Saves per match, 5.3, that's first. So that's Brad Stuver negating what a lot of the defense is doing, which is interceptions per match, 8.3, that's 21st in MLS. Tackles per match, 12.5, that's 27th. Clearances, 25.9, that's 9th in MLS, so a little better at that part of the game. But that 14 points drop due to goals let in from winning or drawing positions at the 68th minute or later. And again, they have done that in now, counting real quick here, 8 different games to contribute to either wins that turn into draws or draws that turn into losses as a result of letting in goals in that last kind of 22 minutes of the match. And a lot of times it's in the last 15. So again, you've got a team that is terribly underperforming their talent levels, and it's showing up in the advanced numbers, it's showing up in the raw stats, it's showing up in the table. There's just, you can't really deny the numbers at this point, and there's really no indication that, again, Nico, despite his belief, was going to be able to turn that around. It did not seem that, unless they got an infusion of talent and some changes happening in the summer, which again, maybe there's some players that need to go out just to improve the overall kind of tenor of the team, the overall kind of discipline of the team. Discipline was something that Nico talked about in that final press conference. Maybe there are some changes that could have been made in the break, but you've got a team that was league worst in a lot of areas, and certainly league worst right now, looking at the numbers that count.
Yeah. Speaking of steep hills to climb, in terms of looking at the future, we mentioned getting to this, and boy, we could probably go for 2 hours on this about the names that people wouldn't believe, but that this is the project at hand. And again, I promise, folks, I'm not getting a kickback for saying this. I went into this not thinking I was going to say this, but this is the time to do it. And this is the time, looking at the roster, and we could go slot by slot. Christian Ramirez and Brendan Heinzike are like the guys that don't have long-term deals or options pending, right? I don't know that you get rid of those guys, because a Brendan Heinzike free back line on this team has not been doing terribly well.
It is not.
Christian Ramirez, solid. I mean, literally in his first minutes with the club, after a very rough, less than 7 days before he was playing for the team that let go of him, that guy has showed the hell up and has been a rallying presence in the locker room, where he's not like trying to be the Ilie in waiting, but in the glimpses that we've gotten during locker room availability, he has been the guy going, Mirtu, you deserve to take some credit for how good of a game you had. He is cheerleading his fellow players like he's getting paid 3 times what he's getting paid.
Best thing Roto did this season was get Ramirez on waivers, but the Galaxy made it real easy.
Real easy.
Real
easy. And I thought it was great. And that's an example of, there are a lot of things that Roto has done well that are helpful in a transitional way. One of the biggest things has been salary parity. The biggest problem with Julio Cascante was not his quality as a player. It was that his quality as a player was paired with the contract he was on. And that he was on the contract that he was on, and everybody on the team knew what contract he was on. That causes a disparity where there are guys that, even though he wasn't getting minutes over them, it sure did affect things when it came to, why am I busting my ass and that guy is making 3 times what I make to ride the bench?
Yeah.
Those kinds of issues are pretty much a thing of the past. We could say things about the DP situation. But really, like, the biggest issue that I took with stuff that Doyle said on the Moises previous episode that he followed up on soccer-wise was prioritizing the number one thing Austin needs to do is get rid of Mircea Uzuni. And this is not me standing Mircea Uzuni, but Hader Obrian got bought out in January. The club has one buyout. If you're using that one buyout on somebody who is absolutely not performing, taking up a senior spot, and not playing meaningful minutes, my money's on Basard Sabovic because there is no market for that player. Nobody's buying that guy.
Right. I mean, I think there would be a market for Uzuni. I understand that in terms of, okay, if you want to get a DP chance creating number 10, you have 3 DPs to choose from. You have Vasquez, who has just come back from ACL surgery, and he is the starting number 9 that you envisioned. Again, I don't know if he's going to get to the level that he was at Cincinnati, but certainly he is your target number 9 and can do some other things too. And a lot of hopes in him. Facundo Torres, who you just locked in with a multi-year contract, right? Who just recently in MLS, before he went to Palmeiras, was averaging 24 goal contributions a year for 3 seasons with Orlando, right? And then you've got Uzuni. Again, you've got 3, you only have 3 DPs. If you could have a 4th DP, then sure, keep all 3 of those and get a number 10. But do you do a TAM 10 maybe? Do you do a U22 10 and maybe jettison one of the existing U22s? That's Dubrsarski, that is Georgievich and Wolf. That's challenging.
Here's the question. So on the notion of a conventional 10, and this is something that I know that it's also on your wish list to Santa for Austin to play a conventional 10, and I get that. Rather than say that I'm against it or I'm disagreeing with it, what I'll say is that getting Sabovic out of the midfield where he's currently a black hole and makes every player that plays next to him worse when he does get minutes.
Right.
For me, is the more effective use of the buyout. To your point, that I think there can be a market for Uzuni, and
he wasn't even in the match day 20 on Saturday.
Yeah, so Sabovic wasn't in the match day 20, but Uzuni is. I've become very fond of saying he's doing what Messi refuses to, which is acknowledge the fans and also defend.
He's been solid this year. There's a little bit of square peg round hole, but they were trying to make him work as a connector, not necessarily what he's best at, but I think he's useful. Certainly, he's definitely contributing. It's just that the whole build of the team is a little bit dysfunctional. And again, when we're getting into kind of our wish lists in terms of coaches, there's one I have in mind that I think can take the kind of pieces that Austin has and figure out a better configuration for them than Nico was able to. Nico really privileged a lot of positional flexibility, and I think that that's valuable, but it's
a way to survive in MLS.
Yeah, right. Still within rigid formatting systems, though. He talked about not believing in formations necessarily, but I think that there was still a little bit of rigidity to what he did. Sometimes a 4-man backline, sometimes a 5-man backline, but not really convincingly a 5-man backline.
The way that it came off to me was that he was big on an ever-shifting formational structure, where it was, when playing this game state, suddenly we're a 4-4-2. When playing this game state, we're suddenly a 3-5-2. When playing this game state, and it was like, I don't mean this as throwing shade at all the players or even specific players, but I think that in a similar but different way to Josh Wolf insisting guys stay in their spot, stay in their spot.
Right.
That gets a bit mentally over complex for a certain kind of soccer player's brain.
Yeah.
John Gallagher can handle it all day and all night.
Right.
Basard Sabovic obviously can't handle just sticking to one formation.
Danny Pereira notably said on Saturday that players were confused talking to on. Yeah. So,
and well,
he
said that, and I want to give him the benefit of, we're lacking a little bit of context from, again, things that I have heard on background that I have come to understand is that there very much was coaching over the coach that came from Roto. And the way that he talked about confusion, and I'm not applying this to him and I'm not sourcing it to Danny. Sure. Nobody should take it that way. Okay. But I have heard something that is remarkably similar to the way that Danny was talking, where the coach would give the tactics and Roto would corner this guy or that guy and be like, all right, when this happens, you do this. And there would be contrasting orders given. And the confusion is, who is actually my boss? The guy who decides whether I'm getting traded or the guy who's supposed to be my boss? And that, to me, is the fundamental disconnect that I want to believe is what went into the galaxy brain aspect of Precourt making this decision. Is he saw that no matter how high he could have been on Nico and things he could have seen from Nico that we didn't see, that players could have seen, there was no way to retain this coach if you were getting rid of the sporting director, and there's no way to get rid of that coach without getting rid of the sporting director, to not give you to steal something from Miami in the same way that Austin stole their first goal in their stadium, freedom to dream of a better future for the club, of a competitive life for the club.
And this just kind of hit me again. So maybe this kind of like sporting director centric approach that Roto was selling is more of a strong CSO, weak coach sort of setup.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you for the pass. And here comes the layup. My concern in recent months was that I felt like I had an overwhelming amount of evidence that Roto Borrell was setting himself up as coach for life, impervious to harm, for whom whatever coach was under him was going to be the heat sink for whatever heat came his way. And that's exactly what I have. I have more than enough anecdotal information from primary sources and anecdotal information from people who dealt with him in other directions to indicate that that was very much the case. Was at a certain point, Roto didn't care how difficult it made Nico's job. He knew that he had a coach who was going to do best by his players and who was going to get the soundbite ready, eat whatever shit got shoved down his throat. And that's why I'm totally okay with the dual firing. And I think that that is something that undoubtedly, if I noticed it, I'm certain that ownership noticed it and was aware of it. At a certain point, the bluster wears out. At a certain point, the people just don't understand my fourth dimensional genius. That isn't to say that there aren't various things that Roto did very, very well, but broken clock, right twice a day. Claudio Reyna gave us Sebastian Driussi, but all this other stuff. The roster is much more reasonable for having locker room relations not be stratified because some people are on absurd salaries because of I don't know what kind of bodies certain agents knew where they were buried on Claudio Reyna to get some of those deals out of him. Much fewer of those, but I think that as fair-handed as I want to be to Mirtu Uzuni, who in the context of where he has come from the moment he started at the club last year, that guy's taken his lumps. He's gotten bruised. He has gotten absolutely pilloried on social media. He definitely has heard it, or he wouldn't have multiple deactivated his accounts. And I think just as a human being, regardless of him crowning himself after goal celebrations, scoring things that were mostly John Gallagher with a soupçon of Uzuni on the end of it, all that aside, he has taken his lumps, but Roto hasn't properly taken the lumps for, why was that a $12 million transfer fee again? You were looking for a replacement for Driussi in the two-striker setup where it was going to be Vasquez on top, Driussi underneath him. If that was the plan, in context, we've seen how it played out since. If that was the plan...
Uzuni's a little bit different than Driussi in terms of
precisely. Uzuni is a different player than Driussi. And if you identified that, great, but it doesn't look like they accounted for that. And as much as he kept saying, it'll be fine, is it on the player who is a young first-time father who thinks he's invincible and he knows that when he gets angry, he turns into the Hulk and Hulk smashes? Is it his fault that he is a young, I want to be the man carrying the flag at the front at the battlements?
Youngish.
Some would say not young enough. Or is it the guy who is assuring, it'll be fine. The Strait of Uzuni will be open next week. It'll be fine. Next week, it'll be fine.
Okay, so let's think about the future. Let's
do
about
it.
where coaches are next. So we had a live podcast on the shuttle on the way back Saturday night
Uh-huh.
and got into the Wilfred Nancy question, right?
Everything's possible now, Phil.
Sure.
Your
Well, check
dreams,
this
they
out.
could be true.
So a little less than 4 weeks ago, Ilya Sanchez had shared a Instagram picture and then took it down, which was a screenshot of him in a kind of conference call setup thing with Nancy and Jamie McMillan, who was the Crew's #2 sporting director hired by Tim Bezbachenko in 2020 when Nancy was with the team, right? So fans got their hopes up, momentarily thinking, oh, there's a package deal. McMillan and Nancy are going to come to Austin FC, perhaps, right? So, or just thinking that Nancy was going to come to Austin FC. Could that be a possibility now? Could you have a female sporting director, which would be pretty novel? And again, she was with Toronto before she was with, and again, this was pre-signing expensive Italian players, Toronto, and then Columbus. So somebody who certainly knows the league, certainly has done well in terms of navigating all the things that Rodo had to learn as he got here, right? And then, of course, Nancy, who I think could take the kind of chopped basket that we have here and turn it into something absolutely delicious that would delight all the celebrity chefs that come in there.
Well,
or who's the guy? I forget who the chopped guy was. Wasn't he? He was the like
chopped
the,
guy?
Yeah,
from
Ted. He was like,
Ted from the original cast of Queer Eye.
Exactly. Yeah.
I forget Ted's last name because I got so accustomed to just his first name.
But I can see him in my mind.
Yeah.
Original Queer Eye was great, by the way.
So on the shuttle, you were practically exasperated that I didn't want to believe in the possibility of hope. I didn't want to believe. And I was qualifying it the whole way, the way that I have on the podcast, where it's been, don't you think a better coach? I could not possibly see a path to that coach who has famously clashed with ownership and sporting operations in Montreal and then at Columbus, where they were not getting his back and he was competing in 3 competitions simultaneously. And he was running a good operation there on the coaching side of things. He had a good thing going with Jamie McMillan. And like to put it flat out there, in a league of sporting directors you wouldn't believe, Jamie McMillan has earned her stripes, more than earned her stripes. And it's far beyond time for women to be in sporting director positions who have earned it and are more accountable than a lot of the guys who fall from a certain coaching tree, who fall from a certain lineage, who bend the knee at a certain throne, right? Now that the future is wide open, it's absolutely possible. And this is the kind of thing that, do you want a combo coach sporting director, an Oscar Pereja, Peter Vermees? Bruce Arena's not available, sadly to some, not sadly to most of us.
I don't know that Peter Vermees necessarily.
I do not see rolling back the clock. I don't see rolling back the clock to MLS 1.0, the way things used to be done. Likewise,
and I know Garth Lagerwey's name came up as a sporting director, but like also he's fighting cancer, right? Still.
Well, so I didn't realize this, but he's apparently made a really solid recovery, and and is in good health, which is great news. And I didn't know it just because I don't so closely follow Atlanta or the entire league or the other conference. That's great news, but even if he is staying done with Atlanta, I don't see Garth Lagerwey, quote unquote, leaving Atlanta for Austin, making Austin. Well, that's my next move. I have not had cancer myself, have a lot of friends who have been through that journey. And there is a sort of reflective, what am I doing with my time? Who am I spending my time with? What is meaningful to me? And I can see the very valid, that guy has deserved time with his family. There may be something that is less intensive, less grueling than day-to-day sporting operations that keeps him in soccer, where he would have his pick. And it could be at the league level. It could be U.S. soccer or something. But I just don't know. I just don't know that I believe he wants to do a starting from scratch, really hard grind thing again. But hey, could be wrong. And if they announce Garth Lagerwey, he could do a great job as a sporting director.
Yeah. And from knowing from Sam Jones and his time with the Striker when he was profiling Lagerwey when he came on, absolutely great guy, brilliant MLS operations, did a really good job at Seattle. Did spend on some players that didn't quite work out, but I think that's just being Atlanta, not necessarily on Lagerwey, right?
Yeah.
So because that seems to have followed them around after he left, right? So it is a place that is attractive to some, but that's the thing though. It's hard to consistently hit on DP and U22
Big
talent,
time.
but that's a lot of the job when you're a sporting director.
For me, from where I sit today, again, not fully having processed everything, but I think you phrasing it the way that you did in that press conference, as we confer in the press box, when we start to see the direction that something is definitely going, and we kind of recalibrate ourselves for, all right, how's this going to go? What are we going to do here? That you keyed in on that phrasing, I think is crucial to the way that ownership and the firm that they've retained to begin the search, which despite whatever a press release says, I don't have sources on this, but you don't make a decision like this and not already have yourself a little ways down the runway.
Yeah. They didn't call Excel Sports Management on Sunday and say, hey, we got a project for you.
Yeah. This is something that
this
I'm
was
sure,
in the works.
Yeah. I think certainly. There were contingent, I mean, Austin is still very good about keeping the black box curtain drawn when it comes to specific inner workings, and that's any corporate environment, and there are certain things that are cagey about the way that they phrase them and everything. You don't make a decision this seismic without having some sort of a plan in place and having it part of the way down the runway. If I were a betting man, to stay away from the individual names, aside from a couple things that I do want to mention, I don't think Jim Curtin happens because my understanding is he wants to stay on the East Coast, family, kids in school, that kind of thing.
Sure.
I think that's totally reasonable. Would he be a great coach at Austin? Sure.
Would love that.
Wishes were fishes, would love it, but I think that there is something there. I don't see there being a distressed asset coach hire that ownership thinks is in any way tenable. They need a name that people actually would not believe. They need to fulfill the promise of what Rodolfo Borrell threw out there to people.
Right.
That was the expectation. They know
like
that
that's the expectation. Like a Gio Savarese even. I don't know. I mean,
could be,
but would that be?
To me,
would that be enough? Would that be?
For me, it's to pull back from the names. I think it is more likely that we're 100% not looking at MLS 1.0 style, one coach to rule them all and in the darkness bind them. I think it is more of a package deal situation where they want something that is responsible, something that is on the senior staff that is still with Austin FC, that have been with them from day one, that came over from Ohio with Precourt. They want lifers. They want that kind of long-lived experience in terms of the deeply buried roots of the club. And that's why, I mean, a week ago, when this hadn't happened yet, did I think that a Wilfred Nancy under Rodolfo Borrell was possible? Absolutely not, and I never did. But the package deal of him and Jamie McMillan, that kind of shape makes all the sense in the world to me, where there is some amortization of risk, where it is not we're bringing in one big personality to replace a big personality and a distressed asset coach, which, to be totally fair to Nico, that's what he was, coming in as an in-state rival coach with the record that he had at Dallas. They want to project confidence, and something that is in no way betraying any confidences. I am under no illusion whatsoever that Anthony Precourt is afraid of spending the money it takes to get the job done. And Anthony Precourt is absolutely committed to a winning franchise. This is not a movie studio tax write-off business for him.
Right.
I have seen no indications that this guy is terribly tolerant of repeated failure. It's a matter of making the right big choice at the right time. And I think that this being where we are, I don't think that Austin would be set up for the kind of package deal solution that they would have been if they'd just gotten rid of the coach.
Yeah. Yeah. So it seems that in your estimation here that Precourt has set himself up for a big move by completely clearing both positions.
I think so. That's the thing is, I feel like I'm belaboring the point, but if Rodo Borrell had stayed in place, Rodo Borrell, who cleaned house, stating something is fact, not telling tales out of school, nothing off the record in that. We saw all the people who were just gone. To some extent, I feel like in the same way, Nico was set up for it to be perfectly fine as far as Rodo was convinced for Nico to fail. I feel that's what he did to Brett Utley with the second team last year, where first team roster issues, players are being pulled over for first team call-up duty at the last second, leaving the second team very shorthanded and just dismissing the second team as whatever. You can weigh what's most important to the club however you want, but I think that sort of cutting off the nose despite the face sort of thing, where everything is very cutthroat inside the tent, I don't know. I think that there are some very valid things that Rodo identified as major issues where when it came to discipline, when it came to people being in places, but there was a lot of chummy, buddy hiring going on, which that's what a chief soccer officer is supposed to do. They're supposed to bring in their people. But the question I have is, what was the actual long-term roadmap other than just add my guys, results will follow? And when results don't follow, I deflect everything to the coaches that aren't. It is not me, it is the children.
Or the lack of GAM.
Or lack of GAM that is wrong.
Right.
I feel like there is something of wanting a proven team to come in rather than let's see if we can make an odd couple work. Or let's put the Rodo Borrell level of trust in a new sporting director. Yeah. Instead, let's look at something that, in the way that Christian Ramirez hit the field and in his first minutes, it was like he'd been here for ages. A proven team that knows how to work together and that knows how to manage, rough edges in the locker room, bruised egos, inheriting the work of other people. I think Wilfred Nancy and Jamie McMillan are a perfect fit for that. And if it's not them, I think that is the ideal kind of profile that this club wants.
Yeah. So I thought that kind of interesting wording here about the job that Excel Search and Advisory is going to be doing to lead the global search for the club's next sporting director, with the goal of identifying a sporting leader who aligns with Austin FC's long-term vision and competitive objectives across all levels of the organization, including the first team, second team, and academy. Interesting. Okay. And then the 60-day midseason pause that begins at the conclusion of the upcoming match versus St. Louis City SC affords the club a natural period to implement a transition and position the organization for success. It kind of sounds like maybe they got someone in mind. Like maybe
I
some of this stuff was happening behind the scenes for a couple months.
I'm going to say this as somebody who's been on both sides of the firewall, as I've occasionally had to remind our friends in the marketing and comms departments, hey guys, I've written those press releases. I get you. I get it. I get you. What this press release says to me is exactly that, is they want to validate some candidates that they already kind of have in mind, because the candidates that you want are going to be few and far between, and it's going to be pretty obvious who the overall field is, who's available, who's out of a job. You're not hiring somebody who just finished coaching in the third division in Europe that nobody's ever heard of. You're wanting some kind of a winning mentality. You want people who have hardware on their resume recently, not just look at the breadth of the resume, the vermise, the arena. And to me, it feels like that search firm was brought on to do proper vetting and enshrine that these names that this ownership group would very much believe are indeed the kind of profile that they should want. And they've been through this dog and pony show recently enough that, different people are available than were available a couple of years ago. In coaching, different people are available than were available 3 years ago in sporting direction. And so I think that experience is fresh enough that I don't see an Anthony Precourt going, I'm just going to trust that this is definitely going to work and not think about contingency plans for if this doesn't work. That's not how you make the money that guy made in business.
Yeah, for sure. Anything else? You think you said that you might have like a surprise name that would make me chuckle?
Oh no! What I mean, the surprise name was that I gave all that credit to Anthony Precourt. That was the surprise. That was the surprise all along. But technically, the Wilfred Nancy thing, it was finally, Phil, we're in alignment on Wilfred Nancy. I just needed the sporting director fired so that I could reasonably lay out my thesis.
We have been Statler and Waldorfing all week, but you know how they always spar and then they come into alignment?
Yeah, they come into alignment and then they're making fun of the Muppets and not each other. That's the thing, man.
Is Rodolfo Borrell a Muppet in this scenario?
Is he Sam the Spanish Eagle? I don't know. Yeah, there's been a bit of levity peppered throughout this, and I know that we kind of addressed this at the beginning, but both of these gentlemen who are no longer with the club did make meaningful contributions in the young history of this club that is still just 6 years old. It's not yet ready for second grade. And I think that we've got to mention that, and that history will be kinder to the overall first decade once the team and club have had a chance to mature to that point. And this is part of those growing pains where one of the biggest things I agreed with the Soccer Wise guys about was in their first year, St. Louis City wasn't that good of a team. They were just only competing in one competition and got lucky in all the stupidest MLS-iest ways.
Starting with that first match, which they rightly said ruined Kip Keller's career. We're on the other knife's edge side of the inflection point, and now it is, let's really cook. Let's see what a rejuvenated Austin side is capable of doing in Leagues Cup, a competition that people very validly have issues with even existing, sure. But nothing would make me happier than seeing these guys who have gone through a tremendous first season of adversity, of results I would never wish on my worst enemy. And one of the biggest things that I've had trouble grappling with is I get hating the coach, I get hating the sporting director, I get hating the results. Having seen the PTSD right in the wake of the immediate shell shock look on those guys' faces in the locker room after these results, I would not wish losses on these guys to hurry up and get the coach fired on any of them. It really does take a toll. So what I hope for most for the fans, for the city, frankly, and for the team is that they're able to head into what I'm referring to as 2026 Apertura in the styling of Liga MX, where the closing comes before the opening. I would love to see them come out of the gate showing us who we saw glimpses of them being against LAFC, against Inter Miami, against various sides, and put in the full 90 performances that, look, it behooves all of these guys to put in to make sure that their market value stays up for the remainder of their careers. And I think that with a leader like Ilie Sanchez having the armband, I could not be safer in the knowledge that there is reason to hope, there is reason to dream for a revived Phoenix rising from the ashes going forward. And I don't think that it's going to be interim coach Davy Arnaud come July. I don't think they're going to rush the search necessarily, but I think they've got people in mind. I kind of feel like the search has maybe been a little underway. No way of knowing that necessarily, but I feel like they, with that game against the Sounders on July 22nd, that they want to have that coach in place. They want to have that direction going forward. They want to take advantage of what this World Cup break affords to be able to institute a new coach. It's not a full preseason, but it's a lot better to have that kind of pillow, as it were, than versus the hard, flat reality of, oh, we're going to go into 4 more matches in June and 5 more matches in July when it's like 105 degrees. And you've got to just fight your way through that part of the season without a system in place.
I don't want to set expectations of this is exactly what people should expect, because I know that we followers of Austin have experienced expectations set higher than one is capable of clearing the bar of. I think it speaks very well of getting set up for the second half of the season if new coach is announced, decided on before the mandatory MLS PA 3-week break given to the players right on the other side of St. Louis, if new coach is announced as soon as they are back and is ready to rock and roll and has already been done and dusted. And I think there could be more Austin FC based news than we expected during the 2-month break. And I guess now that kind of the tension has been released, I might have a mock-up of something that I'll put out there that it's not my fault that I know what I know, that fans of the club are going to be more interested in seeing than they would have been before this morning.
This is the best thing I've heard in the history of the 8 years I've been on this planet.